Hey, it's me, James, and in this video we're going to be wrapping up the Kipper Cards by Category series with a conversation on the stop cards. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this video. If this is your first time here, I'd like to say welcome, and if you're a returning viewer and visitor, I'd like to say welcome back. As I said in the opening, this is the last installment, part 5 of a 5-part video series where I've been discussing Kipper cards by category. This is actually honoring the request of a viewer named Eloy. Hey Eloy. Eloy was kind enough to DM me through Instagram asking me if I would be willing to talk about the different groupings of cards within the Kipper card system. So if you're just landing on here, if this is your first time discovering me and this video series, then in part 1 we talked about the first group, which is the people cards. In video 2 we talked about the connector cards. In video 3 we talked about the movement cards. And in the previous video, video 4, we talked about the cause and effect cards. So like I said in the opening, we're wrapping things up with the stop cards. This is the group of cards that has the most number of cards in it. And so before we get to the cards, I figure I might as well tell you what deck that I am working with. If you're no stranger to the video series, then you already know. But if you're here for the first time, I'm working with a Kipper card deck that I made myself for my own personal use. And it is the Kipper of Himm. And there is the title card. And so if you want to know more about this particular deck, you can find it all out in video 1. I discussed all the reasons why I created it and why I'm working with it in this video series. So I will say, since I said why I'm using it for this video series, one of the reasons why, and it matches or aligns with Eloy's request, is that when I designed the deck, I was thinking about the different categories of Kipper in mind, and each category has a different colored border. So the people cards in my deck have a purple border, the connector cards have a pink border, the movement cards have a green border, and the cause and effect cards have a yellow border. So the stop cards have a red border, and the reason being is because the movement cards with a green border and the cause and effect with a yellow border, I went with the natural inclination of a traffic light. So we're working our way up the traffic light, and it just makes perfect sense with that in mind that the stop cards would be red. So why stop cards? So the stop cards function as a way of slowing the reading down, right? If you stop and think about, and that was no pun intended, but if you stop and think about like the reasoning for a stoplight or a stop sign even, it is to slow things down, to bring things to a stop. So the stop cards, their function is to bring the story of Kipper, or whatever we're looking at in the cards at the moment is the story, right? To bring the story either to a break or a stop, or to bring it to its natural conclusion. I tend to think of the stop cards as like if things were a sentence, if the Kipper cards were a sentence, and these would be the periods in the sentence, yes? Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to go through the stop cards one by one, and I will be giving some brief meanings of the cards because there's usually not any kind of directional cues. They're more with the other groups of cards that I've discussed. So if you're wanting more in-depth meanings on the cards, if that's why you're here, then you may want to check out my Kipper card meanings playlist. I made it a few years back, but it is considered one of my pieces of content that is evergreen, and people can check it out at any point in time. So if you're looking for something more in depth, I would suggest you go there. And as I'm saying that, I will be making a note to leave a description link, or a link in the description box below, I should say, for that particular playlist, as well as all the previous video installments of this series. Okay, so now let's get to the cards. So the first card, and I'm going in the numerical order that they would appear in the deck. So the first card is letter. And so letter, its chief meaning is it represents all forms of communication. It usually represents good news because if you checked out the last video, then you will know that there is a polar opposite card in the deck called sad news. And so Kipper is very interesting because it tends to run in polar opposites in some cases, right? So this would be considered all forms of communication, typically good news, right? And it can represent things in this day and age like posts, like social media posts, right? If you go with the idea that mail was sent in the post, right? Or documents and paperwork, things like that. It can also represent things like voicemails, text messages, emails, all forms of communication, whether it's written or verbal. So that is letter. Next up, we have card 11, which is win lots. So this card is usually about financial windfalls, good luck. In my particular deck, or my particular depiction of the card, there is a slot machine. Yeah, so for me, it can represent gambling, taking chances, strokes of luck, right? But it's also because of the name win lots, it can represent multiples of something, right? A lot of something. So this one has a twofold meaning. It can represent financial windfalls or a lot of something, right? And then you would look to surrounding cards to see what that might be. But that is win lots, number 11. Number 15 is success in love. For me, I wanted to go with paying some respect or an homage to the original Kipper deck. And in that one, Success in Love has the image of two turtle doves and a dog seated underneath them in the image. But I went with the turtle dove. So this card can represent things like friendship. If you go with the idea that a dog is pictured in the card or in the traditional image, it can represent companionship, loyalty, fidelity, all the things that we associate with dog, like trustworthiness, right? For me, over the years of working with this system, this card shows up as a message to pay attention to our intuition. So for me, this is an intuition card. But its chief meaning is friendship, partnership, companionship, because there's two birds on the card. But it also represents success, a good outcome in situations, yes, because of the success part, right? So that is success in love. Next we have thoughts. In traditional, Kipper card cartomancy, this is known as his thoughts, right? Whereas, and I didn't mention this in the previous video, but expectations is known as her thoughts because there's usually a woman depicted in the image, yeah? So, but I just call this thoughts in my deck. So for me, this represents thinking, and it represents things like analysis, research, investigation. It can also represent things like scheduling. I've had it for me in my own personal work with the system that could represent taking a look at your schedule, your calendar. You know, it reminds me of card number 4, which is a connector card, get together, where I talked about meetings and appointments, right? This would be getting those kinds of things on the calendar or the schedule, right? This is also because it deals with the mind. This card can also be about meditation and contemplation if you're spiritually minded. And in my card, I have a light bulb here in the corner. So for me, this can represent things like illumination, clarity, you know, having a light bulb moment, you know, that aha moment where you have you come to some awareness or you have an idea, yeah? But those are all the things that I think of with the thoughts card. Okay. So we have some buildings that are prominent in the stock cards as a group. So here's the first one. This is card 20. This is house. So this represents your home life, your personal life, real estate, property, things like that. It's a family-oriented card. You know, anybody that you share living space with, people who live under the same roof together, right? So that for me represents like domestic affairs, your personal affairs, but that is house. And then going one step further along the same lines, card number 21 is the family room card. Now this is different from house in the regards that this can be representing a room. right? So this could be a particular room. Now, surrounding cards might give you a better idea of what type of room. Family room usually suggests a living room, but it could represent any kind of room. Within, let's say, an apartment building, then this would be an apartment. It's any kind of space where you have privacy, right? That's another key thing about this card versus house. This card talks about a smaller space, so there's a greater sense of privacy, right? So this could also even be like office space, right? Where you have a room in an office or an office within a larger building, right? But anywhere that we have privacy. So you figure if you couple this card with a card like short illness, for instance, and that card has a bed in it, then the two cards could be talking about a bedroom, yeah? But that is family room. Next up, we have card number 22. This is military person. Now, this is a card, much like false person that I talked about in the last video, that doesn't always represent a person. It could be the secondary meaning of this card. For me, the chief meaning usually represents things like order, structure, discipline, following the rules, regulations, things like that. Going with the idea like military in a metaphorical sense, yeah? Now, if I go with the idea that it's talking about a person, then this could actually literally be a military person or somebody who's involved in law enforcement, right? Somebody whose role is to enforce some kind of rules, regulations, policies, yes? So you think that would be like military, police, anybody in law enforcement? Now, because he's wearing a uniform, this could also be any type of occupation in which a uniform is required. So for me, this can represent all types of service people, because service people or service workers tend to all wear uniforms, yeah? And then the last meaning I have around military person is that going with the discipline aspect, this could be a message that it's time to put your foot down, right? So that is military person, card number 22. Next up, we have card number 23. This is another building. This is courthouse, right? So you can think of things like having to do with the law or legal proceedings. I tend to think in my own work with the cards that they could represent things on a local, city, county, municipal, things like that in terms of localities, state, or even federal governmental level, right? One of its chief meanings is like public affairs, where the house card is talking about your personal affairs, your domestic affairs. This would be things that you have to do publicly speaking, like for instance, like going to the post office or the division of motor vehicles, or something like that, like City Hall. Any type of thing where you need to conduct some business publicly speaking, right? But it facilitates some area of your life, right? There is a reason for doing it, but it's not, something home-based, right? So that would be the realm of courthouse, right? So that is chief meeting, usually represents some sort of something more administrative than personal, right? So that is courthouse. Next up, we have card 25. This is high honors. So the chief meaning of this card is all about honors and recognition. It's known as the career card in the deck, right? So with that in mind, I have the image of somebody who's graduating college, right? So this could be about graduations, right? You're receiving your diploma, your certificate, right? You're being bestowed an honor with that. But it also sets the stage that, this could be about promotions. If we're talking about careers, moving up the career ladder, yeah? But its chief meaning is usually some honor or recognition with, career, usually speaking. So that is high honors. Next up, we have card 26. This is great fortune. This is actually considered the best card in the deck. It usually talks about blessings, abundance, Um, even greater luck than win lots. And I love the image that I chose for the card here. We have a man who's surrounded by a windfall of coins, right? But yeah, its chief meaning is about blessings and abundance. And like I said, it's considered the best card in the deck. And that is card 26, Great Fortune. Next up we have card 27. This is Unexpected Money. So for me, chief meaning of this card can represent money changing hands, which is depicted in the image, right? So it could represent, paying the bills. This card can represent household expenses. And in my image, there is a house in the background. So it usually represents household expenses. It can represent getting money that you weren't expecting. So this card can represent things like bonuses, refunds. It's money that you didn't necessarily work for. And again, with the unexpected part, it could represent that, a surprise. And it could just represent surprises, just generally speaking, right, with the word unexpected. And another meaning for me is that this card can represent improvement. So something being improved in a situation or experience. Right, so those are the chief meanings that I have for unexpected money. Next up, we have another building. We have prison. So in the literal sense, this could be a prison. But metaphorically speaking, it usually represents being alone or some form of isolation or some form of limitation or restriction, right? With the prison card, I tend to think of like solitary confinement, right? But it also is known as a block. This is a block card. So it could represent some kind of blockage or obstruction, yeah? And that is prison. Next up, we have card 32, which is sorrow. Now, the chief meaning of sorrow is stress. In some decks, it's known as grief and adversity, so it usually represents facing challenges, going through difficult challenges, hard times. And for me, I chose this image because for me, with the idea of stress, it's like banging your head up against the wall, yeah? Metaphorically speaking, right? So that's what the image conveys for me. But that is sorrow. Let me come back to this. So I said banging your head up against the wall. A personal meaning is because I experience headaches and migraines. This is my headache and migraine card. Yeah. So that is sorrow. We have two more cards. Card 34 is work, occupation. This is the job, employment card. This could be somebody who's working with their hands. And I have somebody in the image doing construction work because it wants to convey that idea about working with your hands. Manual labor, physical labor, things like that. That's one aspect because that's one way of you working with your hands, but there are other types of work where you're working with your hands that's not as physical, not as manual, not as laborious, yeah? But it usually typically represents job and employment. So that is work, occupation. And then our last card is Hope, Big Water. Now this is a card that talks about dreams, right? With the idea of hope. This is like the wish card. This is also a card that talks about spirituality. And if you are intuitive minded, focusing on your intuition, then this card is all about psychic ability as well. Now, with the anchor could suggest something that's fixed, right? Something that's in place. Something that's stable. So this could also be about stability and security if you just go with the anchor part of it. And then the idea about water. So this can also be a card much like my journey card that has the cruise ship on it. So this could be about things overseas, This could be about going abroad, yeah, because the anchor is connected to a ship, right? So it could be about, foreign waters, something overseas, going abroad, things of that nature. But usually its chief meaning has to do with your hopes, your dreams, and your wishes. And there you have it. Those are the stock cards of the Kipper card deck system. And this wraps up this video series. So we did it. We got through all the categories. And if you hung out with me this far and made it all the way through the series, thank you so much for spending the time with me. I do appreciate it, and I hope for Eloy and everyone else who tuned in, I hope this helps you with your Kipper cartomancy practice. And again, this is Jameson Mitchell signing off. Thank you so much for spending the time with me, and I look forward to seeing you again in a future video. So until then, take care and have a great day.